Now I do.
Hate you.
Alright, here we go.
This question is legit. Next video. Okay.
Alright, so one of the methods for solving quadratic equations is completing the square. Alright, so what I mean by completing the square means you want to get something that would get it's called a perfect square trinomial. So when I give you something like this, when I factor this, what you get is x times x is x squared, and plus 4 will be 2 times 2, and then they both have to be negative because I want to add up to negative 4, right? So when you factor this and you get something like this, you're able to rewrite this as x minus 2 squared. So the perfect square trinomial makes this and turns it into a square because it's same thing multiplied twice and you get a square. So this right here is called a perfect square trinomial. And that is your goal for today, is to make your quadratic function. You want to complete the square so that you can take those three terms and rewrite it like this. Okay? The key is to have that perfect C. And I'm going to call that new C today. Okay? So we got to find that new C, because does everybody like the square root method for solving?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Square root method is really easy to do. You take the square root, right? So here's example number 1, and I'm going to show you. First, we're going to start by finding that new C. Okay? So the first question would be find the value of C, find the value C to complete the square. And I'm going to give you the formula for finding that new C. All right? So it's going to look something like this. I'm looking for this C to make this a perfect square trinomial. So to find the new C, you always do this. C, that new C is equal to, you take the half to B, so B divided by 2, half to B, and you square it. And that will give you your new C. Okay? So now, what's my B in this one? Negative 16. So we're going to take that negative 16 and we're going to divide it by 2. Negative 8. And then what's negative 8 squared? 64. That is the new C. This is the new C that will make this a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so that's what we're solving for in this particular problem. But let's finish it. So x squared minus 16x plus 64, right? Now this is a perfect square trinomial. And if I were to factor this, x times x is x squared, right? What times what is 64? 8 and 8. And then they have to be both negatives because I wanted to add up to negative 16, so negative and negative 8. See how they're exactly the same? Yes. So then I could rewrite this as negative 8 quantity squared. Okay? So now here's the new information. You ready? When you have this perfect square, for perfect square trinomial, and I ask you to factor, this right here comes from this. Ready? It's x plus, it's always have to be quantity squared. So you could, once you get this, you could go directly to this by using this. Isn't this half a negative 16?
Yes.
So it's always, once you get that perfect squared, okay, you do this to go from here to here. So you need to know this to find your new C, and you need this to go from this to this when you factor. Okay? So 2 things here, that's new. So let's solve now. Let's use it. Ready? So here's example number 2. We are going to solve, so it's going to say solve x squared plus 5x equals 50. I want to find that, well, first of all, you're going to check to see if the C is the perfect C that we want. So in this case, what's my C?
50.
Negative 50. Remember, you would subtract it over, but just right now, don't subtract it over, just do it in your head, and then it's negative 50. Now, is that negative 50 half of this B squared?
No.
No, so just leave it there. Okay, gonna leave it there, and we're gonna rewrite this, and we're gonna leave room for our new C. So we're gonna leave it like this. We're making a room. Now we're gonna come over here and find a new C. Right? New C is half the B squared. So what's my B? 5. So we're gonna take half of 5, and we're gonna square it.
2.5 squared.
So this will be 2.5 squared, which is 6.25. Okay? Any questions so far?
Wait, can you do it?
Yep. All right. Any questions about the new C? Now we're going to put it next to and put our new C here. Okay? But you're not allowed to just add the new C to one side. Because of the equal sign, you got to do it to the both sides. So we're going to also add that to the other side. So you're going to do it to both. So it's still the same value without changing, right? We just made it. Because if I subtract this over, they both go away, right? So it's like I didn't change the problem. I just made it look different. Now I'm going to factor this. What do we say the factor was? X plus half the B. What was half the B? 2.5. So this becomes 2.5. So when I factor this is what you get. Okay? And that's equal to 56.25. Because you add those two together. Now let's solve. Now we're going to use the square root method here. What's opposite of squaring? Square root. So we square root both sides. Square root and square cancels out. X plus 2.5 is equal to, now remember when we actually putting the square root symbol there, you always have two answers.
Positive and negative.
Plus or minus square root of 56.25, which is same as plus or minus 7.5. Square root of 56.5 to 5, I multiplied it out, is 7.5.
So, but we don't have, we have to simplify it to its, like,
Now, not every square root, okay, can be taken as square root, so you may leave it as a radical. So that means you could leave it as a square root, okay? So now what do? We're not done yet.
Oh, subtract 2.5.
I gotta solve for x, so subtract 2.5, subtract 2.5, so I get x is equal to negative 2.5 plus or minus 7.5, okay? It's 2.5 plus or minus 7.5. So now I'm going to come over here and this gives me two answers. My first answer is x equals negative 2.5 plus 7.5. And the other one is x equals negative 2.5 minus 7.5. There's your plus or minus. So this one, x is equal to what?
X is equal to
2.5.
What's negative 2.5 plus 7.5?
5. That is
5. And then over here, x is equal to
negative 9.
negative 10.
Negative.
So those are my two solutions when you solve this by completing the square. Now, if I could have done this by factoring, but completing the square, you do it like this, okay? Now, this is how the quadratic formula came about, by this, okay? All right, so let's try one more. Ready? Example number 3. Solve x squared plus 10x minus 16 is equal to 0.
X. So.
I have a question.
All right, what's my C?
C would be
Negative 16. Is that negative 16 half the B squared? No. So we're going to move it to the other side.
So add 16.
Add 16.
I know. 'Cause
So x squared plus 10x, and leave a space for our new C, right?
Right.
Equals 60.
So now let's find our new C.
So
The new C is half the B, which is 10 over 2, divided, right? 10 over 2 squared. What's 10 divided by 2? 5. 5 squared is 25. So there's my new C. We add it to both sides.
Why do you add both sides?
Because
if
of
you
the
do it to
equal
one
sign?
side- If you do it to one side, then
If I just add it to one side, it changed the whole problem. Because if I subtract 25 away, then I get the original problem. I don't want to change the original problem, so you have to add it to both sides. Okay? Now, what is this factor to?
factors to so
X
plus
plus
and then if
half a B, which is 5. So this factors to this, which is equal to 16 plus 25 is
16 plus 25 is
41.
Right?
41. Now, what do I do? Square root. We're using the square root method. Square root and square cancels out. X plus 5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 41. And we're going to leave it as a square root of 41. And then minus 5, minus 5. X is equal to negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 41. And you have your two answers, right?
Yes.
Negative 5 plus the square root of 41 and negative 5 minus the square root of 41. And you may leave your answer like this.
Really?
Yep. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why